He fed a dying alien girl, not knowing he was saving his future queen and wife. Humans had settled on this planet decades ago, searching for resources and hope, but the land had a stubborn way of keeping its secrets. Water was scarce, and food often came from recycled supplies or risky expeditions into the wild zones. Yet humans survived, stubborn and curious as always. Ethan walked along one of the narrow paths that cut through the outskirts of the settlement. His boots crunched against the rocky ground, and the wind tugged at the loose fabric of his jacket. He liked these walks. They gave him a sense of freedom he rarely felt inside the crowded colony. Most people were busy with work or dealing with the colony's strict rules, but Ethan preferred exploring. He believed that sometimes the answers to life's mysteries waited where no one dared to look. That day, he had gone further than usual, near a ridge of broken metal and abandoned spacecraft. The area was dangerous. Old machines could collapse at any moment, and the wind sometimes carried sudden storms of dust that could make even the sharpest eye lose track of reality. But Ethan didn't care. Curiosity had always been his guide. He crouched behind a broken hull of a small ship, examining the sky through a crack. That's when he heard it, a faint, irregular sound. It was not the typical whine of the wind or the clatter of loose metal. It was soft, almost human, but somehow not human. His heart skipped a beat. He froze, listening. The sound came again, a weak whimper, almost a plea. Ethan's first instinct was caution. He glanced around. The area was empty. Dust swirled like tiny ghosts in the fading light. Then his eyes caught a small movement near a pile of wreckage. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. There, curled among the metal scraps, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. She was small, fragile, and pale, with skin that shimmered faintly under the sun. Her limbs were thin, almost translucent, and her large eyes reflected the dim light like twin moons. Strange markings ran across her arms and forehead, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. She looked more like a creature from a story than a living being. And yet she was alive, though barely. Ethan's breath caught. He wanted to speak, but his voice seemed to vanish. The girl stirred slightly, her gaze lifting weakly toward him. Fear and pain swirled in her eyes, but there was also something else, a spark of recognition or maybe trust. He could not tell. Without thinking, he took a small water container from his pack and knelt beside her. "Here, drink," he said softly. He tried to keep his tone gentle, though he had no idea if she could understand him. The girl's eyes widened, and she tilted her head toward the water. Hesitantly, she reached out, her fingers trembling. Ethan held the container for her, and she took a few sips. Almost instantly, he noticed a subtle change. Her breathing steadied, and the faint glow in her markings became brighter. She blinked, focusing on him with curiosity, as if she could sense he meant no harm. Ethan sat back slightly, unsure what to do next. He had no experience with aliens. Humanity had seen other species before, but contact was always controlled, often through translators or official channels. This was different. This was personal. "Are you hurt?" he asked, though he realized again that language might not matter. The girl tilted her head in a way that suggested yes. He looked around. There were no medkits, no proper medical supplies, only the scraps he had carried for survival. Still, he acted. He took some dried protein cubes and offered them. The girl sniffed them, then cautiously took one. As she ate, her strength returned slightly, and she sat up with effort. She glanced at him, and for a moment she reached toward his face, brushing a glowing hand against his cheek. The gesture was simple but meaningful, trust, gratitude, something deeper than words could convey. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. He smiled softly. "You're safe now," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you." The girl seemed to understand. She leaned closer, resting her head slightly against his shoulder. Her energy felt strange, alive in a way Ethan could not explain. He realized that she was not just fragile, she was extraordinary, and somehow helping her was no longer just a choice. It was something he had to do. He looked around again. The area was too exposed. Anyone could see them from the ridge above. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he murmured. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She did not resist, though her weight was almost unnaturally light. It felt as if she might float away if not for his hands holding her. The journey back to the colony was tense. Ethan moved quickly but silently, careful not to attract attention. Every shadow seemed a threat, every distant noise a possible danger. He thought of the colony guards, of the people who might see her and not understand. Worse, He thought of those who might hunt her, alien factions who had technology far beyond his understanding. By the time he reached his small home on the edge of the settlement, night had fallen. The air inside was warm and dimly lit, a safe contrast to the harsh world outside. Ethan gently laid her on a cot, covering her with a blanket. He watched as her breathing deepened, the faint glow of her markings pulsing like a heartbeat. He realized something then. This girl, whoever she was, had chosen him in a way he could not understand, and in return he had chosen her. They were bound by something invisible yet undeniable, a connection that would shape both of their lives in ways he could not imagine. Ethan cleaned up and returned with some fresh water. The girl sat up slightly, her eyes following him. For the first time, she made a sound he recognized as a soft, musical note. It was simple, almost like humming, yet it carried emotion. Ethan nodded. "I hear you," he said, smiling. Hours passed. Ethan did what he could to make her comfortable, speaking softly, offering small meals and observing her. Slowly, her strength returned. By the time the first light of dawn touched the sky, she could sit unaided and look around. Ethan studied her carefully. Her markings, her energy, the strange, glowing light in her eyes, it all suggested she was more than she appeared. Perhaps she came from a world humans had never met. Perhaps she carried secrets that could change everything. Yet none of that mattered at the moment. She was alive and he had saved her. That alone felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. By mid-morning, she was able to communicate with gestures. She pointed to herself, then to Ethan, and finally made a small bow of gratitude. Ethan chuckled. "I don't know what you are," he said, "but I guess we'll figure it out together." For a moment they simply sat there, two unlikely companions on a lonely planet at the edge of explored space. Neither spoke much. Words felt unnecessary. Trust had been formed in quiet ways, through care, through protection, and through shared survival. Ethan did not know it yet, but saving her would set in motion events that would reach far beyond Vera Station. He did not know that the girl he had fed and protected would one day become a queen, and that he, in his simple human way, would be destined to stand beside her. But in that quiet moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was life, hope, and the fragile bond forming between them. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan prepared a small corner of his home for her to rest and recover. He watched her closely, noticing every small change, every flicker of light in her skin. She was healing. She was alive, and she was somehow remarkable. That evening he ventured outside briefly to check the settlement. The world seemed unchanged, quiet, and unassuming. Yet for Ethan, everything had shifted. A small, dying alien girl had entered his life, and in doing so had unknowingly altered the course of his future. He returned to his home and found her sitting up, her eyes tracking his every movement. She smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed to reach deep into his heart. Ethan sat beside her. "Tomorrow we figure out what happens next," he said softly. She responded with another hum, a note full of warmth and trust. Outside, the stars shone brightly over Vera Station. Ethan looked up and whispered, "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I promise I'll keep you safe." And for the first time since she had appeared, the alien girl seemed truly at peace. The morning sun spilled pale light across Ethan's small home, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, mixed with the lingering scent of the dried herbs Ethan sometimes used to make meals taste better. For most people, it was just another day on Vera Station, a quiet, remote colony where life was often ordinary and repetitive. But for Ethan, nothing had been ordinary since the alien girl had appeared at the edge of the settlement. Lyra, the name Ethan had given her after the bright constellation above, was awake and sitting on the cot. Her skin shimmered faintly, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. She observed him carefully, her large eyes reflecting curiosity and intelligence. Though she still could not speak his language, she had learned to communicate with gestures, simple sounds, and glowing symbols that appeared on her skin when she experienced emotion. Ethan crouched beside her, holding out a small bowl of protein cubes mixed with water. "Breakfast," he said softly. "Eat, you need strength." Lyra tilted her head, considering the offering. Slowly, she reached out and took a cube, tasting it carefully. Her eyes brightened as she chewed, and Ethan noticed that the faint glow in her markings strengthened with each bite. "Looks like you like it," he said with a smile. "Good, you'll need it if we're going to keep you alive." She responded with a small hum, musical and soft, vibrating through the air like a whisper of wind. Ethan laughed quietly. "I don't understand you yet," he said, "but I think we'll figure it out." The days that followed were a careful routine of feeding, tending, and learning. Ethan had no experience with alien biology, but he tried everything he could think of to help her recover. He observed how her body reacted to different foods, how her glowing markings brightened when she moved or rested, and how she responded to his voice. Sometimes she would try to mimic his words, repeating sounds that were strange but recognizable. "Ethan," she said one evening, her voice soft, high, almost musical. Ethan's heart thumped. "Yes," he said. "That's me." She smiled faintly, and the glow along her arms pulsed warmly. It was a simple interaction, but it felt monumental, proof that trust was growing between them. By the end of the first week, Lyra was stronger. She could move around the small home, though carefully, her movements light and almost ethereal. Ethan watched her as she explored the space he had prepared for her. She examined every object with fascination, touching tools, jars, and fabrics. Sometimes she would stop suddenly, her glowing markings intensifying, as if she sensed something invisible. Ethan began to notice other unusual things. When he accidentally cut his hand while preparing food, Lyra reacted immediately. She reached out, her fingers glowing, and Ethan felt warmth spread through the small wound. It was subtle, but the bleeding slowed and the pain eased. He stared at her, shocked. You can heal?" he asked. Lyra looked at him, eyes wide, and hummed softly. He realized then that she was not just a fragile alien. She was extraordinary. Her presence was powerful in ways he could not yet understand. And yet, despite her abilities, she trusted him completely, a fragile being relying entirely on a human stranger. Ethan's mind wandered as he watched her. He thought about the galaxy beyond Vera Station, full of stars, planets, and civilizations humans had barely begun to explore. If she was capable of healing, glowing, and sensing things he could not, where had she come from? Who would notice if she were missing? He felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories, whispers of alien factions that moved across the stars, hunting individuals for power, knowledge, or wealth. Some species collected rare beings like trophies, others experimented with them. Ethan shivered. He could not imagine what would happen if someone discovered Lyra in this weak state. But he also knew one thing with certainty: he would protect her. Nothing, not fear, not danger, could make him abandon her. She had survived against the odds, and he would do everything in his power to keep her alive. Over the next few days, their bond deepened. Lyra began to understand Ethan's routine, responding to gestures, sounds, and expressions. When he smiled, she glowed brighter. When he laughed, she hummed in harmony. Sometimes she would try to mimic his movements, sitting, standing, or reaching for objects the way he did. It was a silent, joyful learning process. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Lyra made a new gesture. She drew a series of glowing symbols in the air with her finger, forming shapes that reminded Ethan of constellations. He stared at them, fascinated. Though he could not understand the meaning, he sensed they were telling a story. She was showing him something about her world, about her journey, about what she had lost. Ethan realized that the connection between them was not only emotional but almost telepathic in nature. When he felt fear, she shivered. When he felt hope, she glowed warmly. It was as if their emotions flowed between them, unspoken yet powerful. But their peace did not last. On the 7th day after their first encounter, Ethan noticed something unsettling. A faint signal blinked on his communicator, one he had never seen before. It was irregular, alien, and encrypted. His stomach sank. Whoever had sent it knew she was here. Whoever it was not friendly. He glanced at Lyra. She sat quietly, humming softly, unaware of the danger, or perhaps aware in a way humans could not sense. Ethan's mind raced. He had to act. The colony was too open, too exposed. If anyone came looking for her, they would find her quickly. Ethan spent that night preparing. He gathered supplies, water, food, tools, and set aside clothing for both of them. He mapped potential escape routes beyond the colony, toward rocky ridges and hidden caves where ships rarely went. He did not want to frighten Lyra, but he also could not risk waiting for danger to arrive. The next morning, Lyra moved with more confidence than before, exploring a small corner of the home Ethan had prepared for her. She noticed his preparations, her eyes widening slightly as she looked at the packed supplies. She touched the items gently, then glanced at him, and for the first time she made a sound that almost resembled a word. Go, Ethan nodded. Yes, we have to move, he said softly. He knelt beside her, offering a small, reassuring smile. I'll keep you safe, I promise. Lyra's glow pulsed brightly at his words, a response filled with trust and understanding. Their escape began at dawn. Ethan carried her to the edge of the settlement, avoiding the main roads. The desert stretched endlessly, rocks and metal debris scattered across the surface like obstacles in a maze. Every step felt tense. Ethan could sense danger in the air, though he could not see it yet. As they reached a hidden path leading toward a ridge, Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining. She extended her hand, and he noticed something extraordinary. The glow of her markings seemed to reach out to him, creating a faint link that made him feel calm, focused, and alert. He realized then that this connection was more than emotional. It was something that could guide and protect them. Hours passed as they moved cautiously, stopping occasionally to rest and drink. Ethan studied her closely, noticing how her strength returned with each step. He marveled at her resilience. Despite everything, she remained quiet, composed, and observant. She seemed to understand more than she let on, sensing danger and potential escape routes in ways he could not. By midday, they reached a rocky outcrop that offered shelter and shade. Ethan set Lyra down, and she looked around, curious but careful. He pointed to a small cave nearby, and she nodded, understanding instinctively. Inside, they found relative safety, a hidden place shielded from view, cool and quiet. Ethan allowed himself a moment to breathe. We're safe for now, he said, glancing at her. Lyra responded with a soft hum, then moved closer, resting her hand on his arm. The glow of her markings pulsed steadily, as if signaling reassurance. They spent the afternoon in quiet observation. Ethan tried to learn more about her. He pointed to objects, mimed actions, and waited for responses. Lyra began to mimic his gestures, drawing glowing symbols in the air and humming softly. Slowly, a system of communication formed. Though simple, it allowed them to share basic ideas, needs, and feelings. Ethan realized that their bond was growing stronger, and that it was not just survival driving it. It was trust, understanding, and perhaps something deeper. He felt a warmth in his chest, a realization that his life had changed forever. He had saved her life, but in doing so, she had changed his as well. As night fell, Ethan built a small fire near the cave entrance. The stars above were brilliant, brighter than he had ever seen from the colony. Lyra watched them silently, her glowing markings reflecting the starlight. Ethan sat beside her, feeling the quiet strength of her presence. Tomorrow, he whispered, we start learning more about each other and about the world out there. Lyra responded with a soft, melodic hum, almost like agreement. Ethan knew the danger had only just begun. Someone or something was searching for her. Yet for the first time since their meeting, he felt a sense of hope. They were not alone, they had each other. And in the vastness of the stars, even the smallest bond could become a force strong enough to survive anything. The twin moons of Vera Station had long disappeared behind the horizon when Ethan finished packing the last of their supplies. He glanced at Lyra, who sat quietly, glowing softly in the dim light of their small cave. Her large eyes reflected both curiosity and a hint of nervousness. Ethan knew she sensed the danger approaching. They were no longer alone in this vast, silent desert. He had spent the day planning their escape. The colony's main roads were heavily monitored, and any attempt to move her openly would likely alert whoever was hunting her. But beyond the settlement lay a series of old, abandoned landing pads, remnants of early mining expeditions. They were risky, overgrown, and unstable, but they offered the only chance of leaving Vera Station unnoticed. Ready? Ethan whispered, his voice tense but calm. Lyra nodded, her glowing hands resting lightly on her knees. Her markings pulsed faintly, almost in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Ethan realized once again that their connection had grown beyond words. He did not understand how it worked, only that it did. She trusted him completely. They moved silently through the desert, stepping carefully over jagged rocks and broken metal. The wind howled occasionally, kicking up dust that stung Ethan's eyes. Every shadow seemed alive, and he imagined scouts, ships, or alien drones watching their every movement. He tightened his grip on the small blaster he carried, though he hoped it would not be necessary. Their advantage was stealth, speed, and unpredictability, human traits that often confused more advanced species. After several tense hours, they reached the first abandoned landing pad. The metal surface creaked under their weight, groaning as if protesting decades of neglect. Ethan led Lyra to a small, barely functional shuttle, its paint faded and panels dented. "It's not much," he said, "but it will get us off the planet." Lyra examined it with wide eyes, reaching out to touch the controls. The glow along her arms brightened slightly, almost as if she approved. Ethan activated the shuttle carefully. Sparks flew, and a low hum began as the engines coughed back to life. The controls were unfamiliar to him, designed for pilots decades ago, but he remembered enough from old manuals to get them moving. Lyra's eyes followed every motion, her expression unreadable but attentive. Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope you trust me," he said. She responded with a soft hum, a vibration that seemed to say more than words ever could. The shuttle lifted slowly, groaning under the strain of its engines. Ethan guided them over the rocky terrain, keeping low to avoid detection. Below them, Vera Station's lights shimmered faintly in the desert night. Soon, the settlement disappeared behind a ridge, and the vast blackness of space opened before them. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself a sigh of relief. "We're clear," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him, and her glow pulsed warmly. He had no idea if she understood the words, but he felt the reassurance in her presence. The stars stretched endlessly around them. Ethan had flown spacecraft before, but never under such pressure. Every decision mattered. Every misstep could mean capture, or worse. He charted a course for a nearby asteroid belt, thinking it would provide cover if anyone pursued them. The shuttle was old, fragile, and poorly shielded, but human ingenuity could compensate for a lack of technology. Hours passed as they navigated through the belt. Rocks floated around them like silent sentinels, and Ethan had to dodge constantly, adjusting the engines, calculating speed and trajectory in real time. Lyra sat quietly observing, her eyes reflecting the stars. Occasionally, she reached toward the controls, touching buttons instinctively. Ethan noticed a faint pulse of energy when she did, and the shuttle responded with smoother movements than he had expected. He frowned. "Are you helping?" he asked softly. Lyra tilted her head and hummed. The light along her markings intensified, almost like an answer. Ethan shook his head, both amazed and confused. Her abilities were growing clearer with every passing hour. She was no ordinary being, and yet she relied on him. Suddenly, a distant streak of light appeared, a scout ship, sleek and metallic, moving fast toward their position. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "We've been spotted," he whispered. Lyra's glow brightened instantly, her energy radiating in waves. Ethan could feel a subtle warmth in his chest, a strange reassurance that they might survive this. He adjusted the shuttle's course sharply, diving toward a cluster of dense asteroids. The scout pursued relentlessly, firing pulses of energy that sizzled against the rocks around them. Ethan twisted and turned, weaving through the belt with a mixture of skill and instinct. He realized that humans' ability to improvise, to act unpredictably, was giving them an advantage. Machines could follow patterns, but humans could think differently, and Ethan was exploiting every weakness in the scout's tracking systems. Lyra's presence was astonishing. Every time Ethan made a risky maneuver, she seemed to sense it, adjusting her position or glowing in ways that stabilized the shuttle's energy output. It was subtle, almost magical, but undeniably effective. He realized that the bond they shared was more than emotional. It was practical, almost like a form of shared intuition. After tense minutes that felt like hours, Ethan guided the shuttle through a narrow gap in the asteroid field. The scout fired one last pulse, but it exploded harmlessly against a rock. They had escaped, for now. Ethan exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the controls tightly. "Good work," he said to Lyra. She hummed softly, almost proudly, and her glow settled into a steady, calm pulse. For a moment they floated in the quiet of space, the stars stretching endlessly around them. Ethan looked at her. "I don't know what you are," he said softly, "but I do know one thing: you're alive because we survived together." Lyra reached out, resting a glowing hand on his shoulder. Ethan felt warmth, reassurance, and an odd sense of connection he could not explain. As they continued through the asteroid belt, Ethan tried to communicate more with Lyra. He pointed at objects, made gestures, and mimed movements. She responded with her own gestures, drawing glowing symbols in the air, humming and moving in ways that made the shuttle feel alive with energy. Slowly, A system of understanding emerged, basic but effective. The next day, they reached the edge of the asteroid belt. Ethan plotted a course toward a nearby planet with dense forests and few signs of civilization. It was a temporary refuge, a place to rest and plan their next move. Lyra leaned forward, pointing at the controls and humming. Ethan noticed that she seemed to understand the concept of direction, of energy, of navigation. He could not explain it. She was alien, but he trusted her instincts. When they landed on the remote planet, the shuttle shuddered and groaned, but it held. Ethan led Lyra out, helping her step onto the soft, mossy ground. The air smelled fresh, filled with the scent of trees and wet soil. Lyra's glow brightened, reflecting the natural light of the planet. She touched the trees, the ground, even Ethan's hands, absorbing the environment in ways he could not comprehend. For a while, they simply rested. Ethan watched her closely, fascinated. Her abilities were subtle but undeniable. She could sense energy, react to danger, and heal minor injuries. He realized that her strength was linked to him, or at least to their bond. It was as if their connection allowed her to survive and adapt in ways she could not alone. Night fell and the planet's sky revealed countless stars. Ethan and Lyra sat together on a small rise, watching the vast universe. Ethan felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and awe. "We're safe for now," he said softly. Lyra hummed in response, a sound that felt like agreement, trust, and quiet joy all at once. But Ethan knew the danger was far from over. The scout ships, whoever they were, would not give up. They were likely part of a larger force with knowledge and technology far beyond what Ethan had seen. Yet, for the first time since finding Lyra, he felt hope. They were not alone. They had each other. And in the darkness of space, even a small bond could be powerful enough to survive anything. Ethan finally allowed himself to rest, keeping a watchful eye on the skies. Lyra sat close, her glowing skin radiating warmth and calm. He felt the pulse of her energy through their shared connection, subtle but steady, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. For the first time, he truly understood that saving her was not just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far greater than either of them could imagine. Somewhere in the distance, a faint streak of light crossed the stars, a reminder that danger was still out there. But Ethan no longer felt fear. He had Lyra by his side, and together they had already survived the impossible. And so, in the quiet of an alien night, two unlikely companions rested, ready to face the next challenge that awaited them among the stars. The small forest planet stretched out in quiet beauty, its trees tall and dense, with leaves that shimmered faintly in the soft sunlight. Birds with bright feathers and strange calls flitted from branch to branch, and small streams ran clear and fast through moss-covered rocks. It was peaceful, almost magical, a stark contrast to the harsh desert of Vera Station and the dangerous expanse of the asteroid belt. Ethan guided Lyra through the forest carefully, watching her movements. She was lighter on her feet than anyone he had ever seen, moving with an effortless grace that made her seem almost part of the natural world. Her glow pulsed faintly as she explored, reflecting her mood, bright when curious, dim when cautious. Ethan realized again that she was extraordinary in ways he could not explain. They had rested for a day, eating small meals and letting the shuttle recharge from its solar panels. Ethan had tried to communicate more, using gestures and symbols. Lyra had responded in kind, drawing glowing shapes in the air and humming softly. Over time, he began to understand her emotions through the intensity and rhythm of her glow. She trusted him completely, yet he sensed she carried secrets, heavier than her fragile appearance suggested. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned deep violet, Lyra approached him. She had been silent for most of the day, observing the forest with careful attention. Now she stopped and looked up at him, her eyes glowing brighter than before. She raised a hand and drew a series of symbols in the air, moving her fingers with precise gestures. Ethan studied them, recognizing some shapes from his previous observations, but others were new, unfamiliar, and full of meaning. "I don't understand," he said softly. "Are you trying to tell me something?" she hummed, and then in a low, melodic tone she spoke a few words in a language he did not know. The sound was soft, clear, and urgent, filled with emotion. Ethan shook his head. "I wish I could understand," he said. "But maybe you don't need words for me to know something important." Lyra's glow pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Then, suddenly, she placed her hands on his chest, over his heart, and the glow intensified. Ethan felt warmth spread through him, not painful but profound, like a connection reaching deeper than understanding. Then she did something unexpected. She leaned closer and whispered, almost in a human voice, "I am Queen. My people need me." Ethan froze. "Queen?" he asked. "You mean a ruler of your people?" She nodded, her glow steady but firm. "Exiled, hunted, only survive." The words were broken, but the meaning was clear. She was not just a fragile alien girl. She was the heir to an alien empire, a being of great importance, and her survival was critical to her people's future. Ethan's mind raced. He remembered the bounty hunters, the scout ships, and the strange signals he had detected. They had been looking for her not because she was alone or weak, but because she carried a legacy that could shift power across galaxies. And he, an ordinary human, had unknowingly become part of that legacy. Why are you here?" Ethan asked. "Why on this colony?" Lyra's eyes softened. She placed a hand on his cheek, and her glow dimmed slightly, as if acknowledging his confusion. She gestured toward the stars, then toward the colony, and then back at him. Ethan understood slowly. She had fled from danger, hiding where no one would think to look, and he had saved her, feeding her when she was near death. "That means I saved a future queen?" Ethan said quietly, almost in disbelief. Lyra hummed softly, and the glow along her arms pulsed in affirmation. She had trusted him when she was weakest, and in doing so, she had formed a bond known in her culture as the soul guardian connection, a link between the queen and the being destined to protect her. Ethan felt a weight settle on him. He had never asked for this kind of responsibility. He was just a human, ordinary in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Yet here he was, entrusted with the life and destiny of an alien ruler. His chest tightened, but he also felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known. He would not fail her. Lyra led him to a small clearing where the light of the stars reflected in the surface of a crystal-clear pond. She gestured for him to sit, then drew shapes in the air above the water. Ethan watched as the glowing patterns formed images: towering cities, advanced ships, loyal soldiers, and enemies lurking in the shadows. He realized she was showing him her people, her home world, and the danger that had forced her into exile. "The Empire," she said softly, "my father overthrown, others want me dead, only survive, return, throne." Ethan's mind worked quickly. If they were to survive, they needed a plan. He could help her, yes, but only if he understood the scope of the threat. He pointed toward the glowing symbols, asking questions through gestures. Lyra responded with clarity, drawing paths, safe zones, and enemy strongholds. Slowly, he pieced together the reality. Lyra's enemies were powerful, organized, and ruthless. They would not stop until she was captured or destroyed. But Ethan also noticed something else. Lyra's glow intensified in his presence, particularly when he touched her or stood near her. He realized that their bond, formed when he had saved her life, was not just emotional but practical. It strengthened her, enhanced her abilities, and allowed her to sense danger in ways even he could not. Ethan took a deep breath. "We need to prepare," he said softly. Lyra nodded. "Train, hide, survive, return." She drew a small map of their immediate surroundings, marking areas they could use for shelter and escape routes. Ethan studied it carefully, memorizing paths through forests, streams, and rocky terrain. Days passed as they trained in secret. Ethan taught Lyra how to move quietly, how to recognize potential threats, and how to use her environment strategically. She learned quickly, her abilities allowing her to sense danger, heal minor injuries, and react instinctively. Ethan marveled at her intelligence, courage, and strength, knowing that humans and aliens could accomplish incredible feats when they worked together. During their training, Ethan also began to understand Lyra's emotions and intentions better. She was not just a future ruler. She was a person, vulnerable, curious, and capable of deep trust and loyalty, and she trusted him completely. Their bond was no longer simply survival. It was partnership, mutual respect, and a connection that felt almost unbreakable. But the forest was not completely safe. One evening, Ethan detected faint signals in the distance, subtle enough that they could have been mistaken for natural interference. He recognized the pattern immediately, tracking devices. Someone was searching for them. Ethan's stomach tightened. "They're close," he whispered to Lyra. Her glow intensified and she hummed, a soft vibration that conveyed understanding and readiness. She had faced danger before, but now it was clear that the hunters were organized, relentless, and far more capable than anything they had encountered so far. Ethan and Lyra spent that night planning. They decided to move deeper into the forest, toward a hidden network of caves and ancient ruins she had identified in her maps. These areas were naturally protected, difficult to access, and could serve as a base to regroup. Ethan also scavenged old equipment from the shuttle, reinforcing it with improvised armor and camouflage. Every small preparation mattered. They could not afford mistakes. As they prepared, Lyra suddenly touched Ethan's hand. Her glow pulsed warmly, stronger than before. Ethan looked into her eyes, and for a moment the weight of their mission seemed lighter. He understood then that their bond was more than destiny. It was hope itself, a force that could protect them, guide them, and inspire courage even in the darkest moments. They set out before dawn, moving quietly through the forest. Ethan led the way, using paths he had memorized, while Lyra followed closely, glowing softly but confidently. They paused only when necessary, hiding behind trees, rocks, and natural cover. Every sound, every shadow was a reminder of the hunters who pursued them, but Ethan felt an unusual confidence. He had survived impossible odds before, and now he had a purpose that went beyond himself. By the time the first sunbeams touched the forest floor, they reached the hidden ruins. Ancient stones, covered in moss and glowing faintly with natural energy, created a natural fortress. Lyra touched the carvings, and her glow pulsed in response. She had known this place as a child, perhaps as part of her culture's history, and it was a sanctuary now. Ethan allowed himself to breathe. "We're safe for now," he whispered. Lyra rested beside him, her glow steady and calm. He realized then that protecting her was no longer just about survival. It was about preparing for the future, about ensuring that the rightful queen could reclaim her throne, and that their bond, formed through compassion, trust, and courage, could withstand anything the galaxy threw at them. For the first time since finding her, Ethan understood the depth of the challenge ahead. Lyra's destiny was enormous, and his role, though humble, was crucial. Together, they would face hunters, conspiracies, and impossible odds. But Ethan was certain of one thing: he would not abandon her. Not now, not ever. As night fell over the ruins, Ethan and Lyra sat together under the stars. Her glow mingled with the starlight, creating a soft radiance that filled the ancient sanctuary. They were two unlikely companions, bound by fate and choice, ready to face the dangers that awaited them beyond the forest. The first light of dawn filtered through the ancient ruins, casting long shadows over moss-covered stones. Ethan stood beside Lyra, who glowed faintly in the early morning light. Her posture was regal, her eyes steady, and yet there was a trace of nervous energy. The final challenge awaited them. Across the galaxy, those who had driven her into exile were preparing to strike. Their fleets were advanced, their soldiers trained, and their strategy cunning. But they had underestimated two things: Lyra's strength and Ethan's ingenuity. "We need a plan," Ethan said softly. "We can't just face them head-on." Lyra's glow pulsed in agreement. She had learned to trust his judgment, and he had learned to trust hers. Together, they would be more than a queen and a human. They would be a force capable of outsmarting any enemy. Using the maps Lyra had drawn in the forest, they organized their allies. Loyal followers who had evaded capture gathered quietly in hidden enclaves, waiting for the signal. Some were skilled warriors, others scientists, healers, and engineers. They were a small force, but they were dedicated. They believed in Lyra, and now, through Ethan's guidance, they believed in the strategy he proposed. The first phase of their plan was distraction and misdirection. Ethan instructed the small fleet of loyal ships to create false targets, drawing the enemy's attention away from Lyra's true location. He spent hours calculating trajectories, timing, and energy bursts, using simple yet clever tactics that took advantage of the enemy's reliance on predictable technology. Lyra observed silently, her glow reflecting deep focus. Once the distractions were in place, Ethan led a small strike team through the hidden forest paths toward the enemy stronghold. The soldiers moved quietly, camouflaged by natural shadows, while Lyra followed close behind, her glow dimmed to avoid detection. Ethan's heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. He knew that every decision, every move could determine the fate of a queen, a people, and perhaps even his own future. As they approached the enemy fortress, Ethan felt a surge of tension. Sensors lined the walls, and guards patrolled every corner. It seemed impossible to enter without being detected. But Ethan had noticed something unusual during his observations. The enemy relied heavily on automated tracking. They were brilliant engineers, but predictable in their patterns. Using timing, misdirection, and sheer human intuition, Ethan guided Lyra and the team past the sensors and into the shadows of the fortress. Lyra's abilities became clear in ways Ethan had not yet fully seen. As they moved through the corridors, she sensed the positions of guards, their intentions, and even minor traps. Her glowing markings pulsed in rhythm with Ethan's movements, creating a synchrony that made their approach almost invisible. The humans relied on logic, strategy, and courage, but Lyra brought intuition, perception, and energy control that no human could match. Together, they were unstoppable. Finally, they reached the chamber where the enemy commanders had imprisoned loyal followers and were planning the final attack against Lyra's people. Ethan signaled to the team, and they moved swiftly. Doors were opened, restraints cut, and soldiers freed, all without raising an alarm. The loyal followers stared at Ethan and Lyra in awe, understanding for the first time how extraordinary their partnership was. Then the alarm sounded, a sharp, blaring signal that echoed through the fortress. The enemy had noticed their intrusion. Soldiers poured into the corridors, weapons at the ready. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but he looked at Lyra. Her glow flared brightly, a wave of energy that rippled through the stone walls. The enemy advanced, but every attack they made was deflected, delayed, or countered by the unusual combination of human strategy and Lyra's alien power. Ethan took point, directing the team with precise commands. Left flank, draw them into the corridor, Lyra, cover the rear. He moved quickly, using debris, shadows, and clever traps to confuse the soldiers. Lyra's energy pulsed in response, healing minor injuries among the team and creating bursts of force that pushed the enemy back. Together, they were a perfect blend of human resourcefulness and alien capability. Hours passed in a tense battle that felt like a lifetime. Ethan noticed something remarkable. Every time he acted decisively, Lyra's power seemed stronger, more controlled. The bond between them was not just emotional, it was practical. Her energy responded to his courage, his creativity, his ability to think unpredictably. They were connected in a way that no enemy could anticipate or counter. Finally, the last of the enemy commanders confronted them directly. A tall figure in dark armor blocked the corridor, weapons glowing. Ethan hesitated, unsure if he could face such a foe alone. Lyra stepped forward, her glow intensifying, her presence radiant and commanding. She did not speak, but her energy filled the room, a force that seemed to bend reality slightly. The commander's weapons faltered. He tried to strike, but Lyra moved with precision, her abilities enhanced by the bond she shared with Ethan. Ethan lunged forward, using his agility and wit to disable the commander's systems. Lyra followed, her hands glowing as energy radiated in waves that incapacitated the enemy. Together, they were unstoppable. Within minutes, the last threat was neutralized and the fortress fell silent. The loyal followers gathered around them, awed and grateful. Lyra turned to Ethan, her glowing hands resting lightly on his shoulders. "We win," she whispered softly. Her eyes shone with gratitude, respect, and something deeper, a recognition of the bond they shared. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest, a mix of pride, relief, and unshakable connection. With the fortress secured, Ethan and Lyra led the loyal followers to safety. Messages were sent across the empire, signaling that their queen had survived, and that hope remained. Across planets and star systems, news spread quickly. Lyra's people, once scattered and fearful, now rallied around her. The exiled queen had returned, and the human who had saved her life now stood as her sole guardian, a symbol of unity, courage, and the strength of humanity. Days later, in the grand halls of her restored palace, Lyra stood before her people. The throne, once empty and cold, now glimmered with the light of justice and hope. Ethan stood beside her, his presence steady, calm, and reassuring. The court watched in awe, understanding that this was not just a queen's return. It was the beginning of a new era, one where trust, courage, and partnership could change the course of history. Lyra addressed her people, her voice soft but commanding. "We have survived," she said. "We have faced those who sought to divide us, to weaken us, to take what is ours. But we are together, we are strong, and we will move forward not just as rulers and subjects, but as allies, friends, and family." Ethan watched as the court erupted in applause and relief. He felt a quiet pride, knowing that his role, small as it might have seemed at first, had made a difference. The human capacity for courage, creativity, and kindness had helped a queen reclaim her throne. And in turn, Lyra's alien abilities, her wisdom, and her power had shown him the boundless potential of life beyond his own species. As the celebration continued, Lyra turned to Ethan. "You, my heart," she said softly, her glowing hands brushing his. "Soul guardian always." Ethan smiled, realizing that this bond was more than survival, more than duty. It was partnership, love, and mutual respect. That night, as the twin moons of the palace planet rose, Ethan and Lyra stood together on a balcony overlooking the vast expanse of their restored world. The stars stretched endlessly, bright and full of promise. Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. They had faced impossible odds, survived danger, and reclaimed what was lost. And they had done it together. Lyra's glow pulsed softly beside him, a reminder of the extraordinary bond they shared. Ethan placed a hand on hers, feeling warmth, trust, and hope flow between them. "We did it," he whispered. "We really did it," she hummed in response, a sound full of joy and quiet triumph. In the days that followed, the empire began to rebuild. Lyra ruled with wisdom, courage, and compassion, and Ethan remained by her side, not just as a protector, but as an advisor, partner, and trusted companion. Together, they inspired humans and aliens alike, proving that kindness, ingenuity, and bravery could overcome even the most insurmountable challenges. And so, under the endless sky of stars, the Queen and her human soul guardian stood together, ready for whatever new adventures awaited. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers, mysteries, and wonders, but they faced it together. For Lyra and Ethan, the future was no longer uncertain. It was full of promise, courage, and the enduring power of trust, friendship, and love.